The widow's voice reached him before the coffee did. "You look tired, like my husband before he left." The sentence slipped through the quiet cafe and landed directly in his chest. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just honest. His hand froze around the porcelain cup, heat pressing into his palm, unnoticed. He had chosen this seat for a reason, the table by the fogged window, half hidden by a hanging plant, where reflections softened his face and strangers rarely looked twice. He came here every morning at exactly 7:40, ordered the same black coffee, opened the same unread email, and pretended routine was a form of peace. No one ever spoke to him. Not like this. He slowly lifted his eyes. The woman stood beside the counter, her tray balanced against her hip, scarf loosely draped as if she hadn't bothered to tie it properly. She wasn't staring at him the way people did when recognition flickered. There was no curiosity about status, no hunger for advantage. Her gaze was steady, almost gentle, as if she was speaking to someone she already knew. "I'm sorry," she added, softer now, sensing the weight of her words. "I didn't mean to intrude. It's just that look. Like you're carrying conversations no one stayed to finish." Something inside him shifted. A small, almost invisible crack. He had been called many things in his life: brilliant, ruthless, visionary, but never this. He cleared his throat. "People usually say I look successful," he replied quietly. "Not tired." She gave a faint smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "People said my husband looked strong. He was exhausted inside." Outside, rain traced uneven paths down the glass, the city dissolving into blurred motion. The cafe hummed with low voices, the hiss of the espresso machine, cutlery clinking, but around their table, time seemed to slow. He gestured awkwardly to the empty chair across from him before thinking better of it. She hesitated only a second before setting her tray down and sitting. "I'm Eli," he said, using his middle name without planning to. She nodded. "Mariam." No last names. No follow-up questions. It felt right. They sat for a moment, both unsure how to continue, until she wrapped her hands around her cup as if grounding herself. "I come here every morning," she said, eyes on the steam rising. "This was the last place my husband and I planned a future that didn't get the chance to arrive." He listened. Truly listened. Not the way board members listened, waiting for their turn to speak. She told him how her husband used to sketch business ideas on napkins, how he believed small routines mattered more than big dreams. She spoke calmly, without tears, and that made her heavier. Grief that had learned to stand upright. "I come," he admitted after a pause, "because my house is too quiet. Silence is easier in public." She looked at him then, really looked, and nodded as if that made perfect sense. Minutes passed. Or maybe longer. He didn't check his watch once. When he finally stood to leave, responsibility tugging him back to a life he couldn't pause forever, she said, "Thank you for listening. Most people avoid widows. Grief makes them uncomfortable." He surprised himself by answering without hesitation. Loneliness does the same. That night, for the first time in months, he noticed the echo in his hallway when he came home. Not because it hurt more, but because something had shifted. A thought lingered. Would she be there tomorrow? The next morning, he arrived early. She was already seated at their table, 2 cups waiting. She looked up, relief flickering across her face before she masked it with a smile. "I didn't know if you'd come back." "I didn't know if I should," he admitted, sitting down anyway. They spoke about smaller things this time. Burnt toast. How the rain made the city feel quieter. How mornings were the hardest because hope wakes up before logic. She laughed once, briefly, when he told her he still tied his ties the wrong way despite owning dozens. Days folded into each other gently. No promises. No confessions. Just shared silence, familiar glances, and words that didn't need fixing. He noticed how she stirred her coffee twice and stopped. She noticed how he tapped the table when thinking. One morning, she mentioned her husband used to do the same when he was nervous. He realized his fingers were already tapping. He didn't feel cured. He felt accompanied. And without saying it aloud, both of them understood this was only the beginning. The rhythm of their mornings became so natural that neither of them remembered when it stopped feeling new. The cafe staff learned their order without asking. The barista stopped glancing at Eli twice, stopped whispering his name. Here, he wasn't a headline or a net worth. He was simply the man who sat by the window with Mariam, listening more than he spoke. One morning, she studied him over her cup and said softly, "You don't look as tired today." He paused. The comment landed gently, not as an observation but as a quiet gift. "I think," he said after a moment, "it's because someone finally notices when I am." She nodded, as if that confirmed something she had already known. They began walking after coffee, not far, just a few blocks where the city woke slowly. He learned she volunteered at a small literacy center twice a week, teaching children whose parents worked before sunrise. She learned he had built his company in the same kind of mornings, early, unnoticed, fueled by belief more than confidence. He didn't talk about success. He talked about exhaustion, about how ambition sometimes grows faster than meaning. "I used to think rest was weakness," he admitted one day as they paused at a crosswalk. "Now I think it's memory catching up." She smiled. "My husband used to say rest is where the heart files things properly." That sentence followed him all day. Weeks passed. The rain gave way to pale winter sun. One morning, Mariam arrived late, breathless, apologizing before she sat down. "I almost didn't come," she confessed. "Some days grief pretends it's finished with you, then shows up early." He didn't try to comfort her. He just said, "I'm glad you did." It was enough. She began bringing a small notebook, writing between sips of coffee. When he asked, she said, "Letters I'll never send. To my husband. To myself. To the life I thought I'd live." He watched her write, the calm concentration in her face, and realized how rare it was to witness someone being honest without performing it. One morning, without planning to, he slid a pen across the table. "In case you ever want to write something new," he said. She looked at him for a long moment before taking it. "Maybe I already am." There was no rush between them. No question hanging in the air that needed answering. Trust grew quietly, like something watered daily without being measured. He told her about the day he lost his own wife years ago, how success had filled the space where grief was supposed to be processed. She listened without interruption, without trying to compare pain. "I don't think loss leaves," she said when he finished. "I think it learns how to sit beside us." That night, he went home and didn't turn on the television. He opened a window instead. One morning, the cafe was unusually crowded. Eli arrived first and saved their table. When Mariam walked in, she hesitated at the door, scanning the room, and when her eyes found him, her shoulders relaxed in a way that told him something important. He had become a place she arrived at, not just a person she met. She noticed him watching and laughed quietly. "What?" "Nothing," he said. "Just noticing how habits become anchors." She considered that. "Anchors are good," she said, "as long as they don't keep you from moving when it's time." The sentence stayed with him. A few days later, he told her he'd be traveling for a week. The words felt heavier than they should have. "I'll miss our mornings," she said simply. "So will I." They didn't promise to call. They didn't dramatize the absence. But when he sat alone in airport lounges and hotel cafes, he noticed how loud silence became without someone to share it with. He started jotting things down on his phone, things he wanted to tell her when he returned. Small observations. Lines he'd overheard. Proof that the world felt different now. When he came back, she was waiting. "You're late," she said, smiling. "I know," he replied. "I didn't want to rush." They talked about his trip, about a child at the literacy center who finally read a full sentence without stopping. Pride softened her face when she spoke of it. He realized then that admiration didn't always look like awe. Sometimes it looked like attention. One quiet morning, she said, "You know, you don't have to sit by the window anymore. People know you now." He glanced around the cafe, then back at her. "I think I sit here because you do." She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was steady. "Then maybe it's not about hiding anymore." Spring crept in unnoticed. Light lingered longer. They stayed after coffee sometimes, walking farther than usual. One afternoon, standing beneath blooming trees, Mariam said, "I used to think moving forward meant leaving everything behind. Now I think it means carrying the right things with you." He looked at her and understood that whatever this was, it wasn't replacing what they had lost. It was honoring it by continuing. There was no dramatic declaration. No sudden realization. Just a shared understanding that life, somehow, had opened a door neither of them had been brave enough to knock on alone. And every morning after, when they met by that cafe window, it felt less like coincidence and more like choice.